Welcome to my Commodore 64 Games memories. This is where I look at old games and some of the technical details behind them. Let's get into it. Today we have Turbo Outrun, published in 1983 by US Gold. The developer was Probe Software, the coder was Mark Kelly, graphics by Steve Crow, and the musician is of course Jaron Tell. So yes, if you like these kind of technical deep dive videos, then please do consider liking or subscribing to this channel or sending me a super thanks. They are all always very much appreciated. I just tried to run the original disk image in Vice 64 with ICU 64 rather in this nice debugging tool, and it didn't quite work. Let's turn off the virtual disk traps and see if that works again. So it just went through and cleared the memory and then reset the machine, which indicates that a protection check has kicked in and the G64 file is not working. Yeah, that's really not working, is it? Okay, let's see if we can find out why it's not working. So we know from the graphics map there that it with the sprites map and the bitmaps view, look, and the text screen view, it's filling the memory in the lower part of memory anyway. So let's put a watch point here on 3000. That's the ROM, kernel ROM kicking in and doing a RAM check, so we don't really need to worry about that. Now this is the game. So the game code starts booting and we can see that the disk is doing some repeated access and then it starts filling the memory. So let's have a look at what we've got here. So we've got an obvious, pretty obvious anyway, at least lower memory clear routine. Looks like it might be clearing the whole memory actually. So it's doing this repeatedly, look, clearing memory, and then it's jumping to FCE2, which is basically reset. So let's put a breakpoint here, start the G64 file again, and we'll start just tracing through this code to see why it's doing that. Why is the protection check failing? Now, the version of Vice which is used in ICU 64 is a little bit older and is a little bit less compatible than the newer versions of Vice, of course. But I'm pretty sure that this G64 I've been able to run it before, but maybe not in this particular version, old version of Vice. So there's the CPU history. Actually, it is being called from somewhere else, this code. So if we have a look, we'll put a breakpoint at 332 and we'll just rerun it again. We're just basically tracing back through the code by looking at the CPU execution history, putting a breakpoint there, and then seeing where we can then look further back in time. So, okay. So it's doing some, it's doing some memory moving code and stuff like that. That was the first pass through. I think it hasn't done, there we go, it's doing the protection check now. Okay, this is the second pass through. So, okay, so this is in the kernel, or it looks like it's inside kernel code. It's inside the kernel ROM memory range. What we can do at this point is that I think we can step out of this kernel routine and then see where we get to. Yeah, so looking at this code, it's definitely kind of like kernel code. There's some comparisons here with the I/O, but yeah, we're not too interested in this. What we're interested in is actually the game code. So let's hop back out of the stack context. What this does is that it returns back to the calling subroutine, whichever did a JSR. There we go. We're back inside the game boot code. We know that because we're back down in lower memory now. And we can see that it's done some EORs and a store into 330. It's then doing a jump into 330 here at 1092. So let's put a breakpoint at 1092. Let it continue on until we get to 1092. And then when we jump into 1092, yeah. So 1092 then jumps to 330. And then, yes, it's basically calling this memory clear and then reset routine. Okay. So something is putting a memory clear and reset routine into this part in memory low down in memory during the initial game boot code and loader code. So we need to start tracing backwards a little bit further to see exactly what's putting that code there in memory. So let's open a new version of Vice, a compatible version of Vice. Let's put it like this. Let's put a breakpoint there at 1092, because we know that that's the jump into that routine at 330 in hex. So now when we run the same G64 disk image file and we get to 1092, this monitor view here up at the top is the new version of the Vice emulator. The monitor window at the bottom is the older ICU version of Vice. And look, we can see actually the code at 330 is different. So the new version of Vice has this load A with DE00JSR369, blah, 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 blah. This looks like very different code to what is in the code in the ICU 64 version of Vice. Let's continue disassembling a bit. 5B, if I disassemble there, yeah, there's a whole bunch of breaks in the ICU 64 version, but on the newer version of Vice, the more compatible version of Vice, there's a whole bunch of extra code. Okay, so now we've found out that the ICU 64 version of Vice is basically putting different code at 330 compared to the new version of Vice. Looks like the protection check has succeeded, obviously, in the newer version of Vice. So let's have a look at the memory differences to see if we can find where the memory differences actually occur and where the memory differences are, well, there aren't any memory differences. So there's 300 and 400 memory views in ICU 64. And there's comparatively, okay, so let's do the same memory address dump there, or let's compare it with what we're seeing in ICU 64. Yeah, so it looks like that the memory view shows the same memory patterns from about 530 in hex, but it's very different code starting at 330 in hex. So what we'll do is that we'll save from the new version of Vice that memory, and then we'll load just before the game has done a jump, right? We'll load that good memory into the ICU 64 version of Vice. And now the ICU 64 version of Vice memory dump is the same as the new version of Vice. So let's quit the new version of Vice. This is the ICU 64 version of Vice now. So it's the older version. And we have the new good memory loaded from the newer compatible version of Vice. So let's just see what happens now. It's hit a breakpoint. Okay, let's delete the breakpoint. And now, instead of clearing the RAM, excellent, look, it's gone into the game. So that was the first protection check. The protection check on the disk side was sending memory clear routine and then reset routine if the protection check failed. That's an interesting way of doing it. The protection check on the disk just sends different code to the 64. It means that the 64 itself doesn't actually do the protection check. The disk side has done it and it's sent different data. That would make it a little bit harder to crack because there's no protection check on the 64 as such. There's no protection check to comment out or circumvent or anything. You just have to know that the drive is sending different data. So if we have a look at the memory read view now, these green lines here in the memory view indicate RAM reading. And as we can hear, the music in the background is playing samples. So let's do a watch store for D418, which is the SID, the sound chip volume register. And we can see here that this looks like sample code to me because the accumulator is being shifted right 4 times and then stored into D418. But there is also a store into D418 up above as well with a branch. which seems to be hopping over. And then there's also some timer related I/O CIA chips. So basically the CIA chip is basically, it's got lots of stuff, but one of its functionalities is a timer. So we seem to have the top 4 bits and then the bottom 4 bits, because of those 4 shifts, being stored into the sound chip volume register at D418. That would certainly play samples from memory. So looking at this code, it looks like it's shifting out the top 4 bits first and then putting those into the volume register, and then the bottom 4 bits and putting those into the volume register. We can see the rough memory range of sample data from the memory view just by seeing that where those green lines were appearing, right? So let's delete those breakpoints. We can see here that the memory lower down, so 4D32, 4D00, we'll have a look for 4D32. So the first load of 4D32, so there we go, it's doing a load. The reason why we put a breakpoint, a watch breakpoint there, or a watch point, is to see what bits are being shifted into the volume register the first time it reads that memory address. So it looks like it's doing the top 4 bits definitely there, by the looks of it. So it's doing a load, and then it does a compare, branch not equal 241C. 241C then does a store into the temporary 2161, then it does a 4-bit shift, and then it stores it into the volume register. 2161 is then a load immediate, and then it does an AND, not, clear carry, add, and then it does a store. So it looks like it's shifting out the 4 bits at the top of the byte first for the higher part of the nibble. A nibble is 4 bits. And then it stores the lower 4 bits into the volume register. So, armed with this knowledge, I think that we could probably play the sample data from the memory that's currently in memory during this title screen. So let's have a little go at that, shall we? Okay, so let's make sure that we are in RAM mode, although we're not going to be saving anything underneath the I/O or ROM chips like the basic ROM or kernel ROM. I think we're just going to be saving the lower part of memory, but it's a good habit to get into when using device monitor is that you switch into bank RAM mode first, so that you aren't hitting anything accidentally in the I/O chips or anything else like that, or the color RAM, for example. But this memory range is in RAM anyway, so we're going to be saving from 1000 to 7FFF. We don't need to have that as part of the file name. What we can then do is that we can just load this samples.prg into a new version of Vice, I think, just to really highlight the fact that we're not relying on any existing code from Turbo Outrun. So here's a new version of Vice. Let's assemble a quick program up in C000, which is 49152 in decimal, which is a very common free chunk of memory, just after basic ROM and just before the VIC and IO registers. The VIC chip is at D000, for example. So we know that we've got a nice free chunk of memory here at C000. So we'll just put a little routine here. We need to have some delay. This is why I'm doing a load X and DEX and then branch and not equal. I want to load 1000 and I want to shift it over 4 bits, right? Because if you remember when we were looking at the routine, the higher nibble is shifted into the volume register first. The volume register uses a value from 0 to F, which is 4 bits long, 4 bits wide. So that's why we need to shift those 4 bits over. And 4 bits plus 4 bits equals 8 bits, which is a full byte, which is quite useful. I wanted to reorganize this routine, actually, I think, because I want to push the accumulator, which is the value of the memory read, and then just pull it and AND it, and then store it into the volume register. So the routine at C100, because I want to have 2 delays, which are the same length of time, I'm going to put that routine at C100. I don't really want to worry about making sure that the code is optimal in terms of memory packing. I don't really care. So I'm just going to put that delay routine at C100. But the delay routine, because it's common, it means that I can then change one value to increase or decrease the delay to make the sound samples play properly. So that's what we'll do. So now let's assemble the delay routine at C100. And because it's a subroutine, we need an RTS at the end of it. There we go. So there's the delay routine at C100, and then we will have the main sample play routine at C000. No, it's not jump, it's just go. Go C000. Let's listen. Okay. Ah, there we go. Yeah, that sounds like sample playback, but the sample is way too slow. The samples are lower in pitch than what we assume, or what we expect rather. So we need to decrease the delay value, and that's at C101, right? Because it was a load X immediate with 2F. So we want to change the 2F to be a value which is smaller. So we'll, make it, I don't know, 1F. Let's try 1F, and then let's see what we get to. So that's a little bit higher in pitch and a little bit faster, but it's still quite slow. So let's make it 1.8 instead of 1F. The data lower down in memory is just data which was hanging around, and obviously it's just screechy sound effects. It's not sample stuff. That sounds a little bit better, but still it doesn't sound as fast or the correct pitch as what it should be. Maybe the samples, when it's playing through the memory, vary their pitch. In fact, they probably do, right? But okay, that's not too bad. The pitch isn't too bad. But I want to make sure that I'm reading a smaller range of memory where the sample data is more likely to be, rather than everything from 0 to 7FFF. So let's... Oh look, there's a little message hanging around in memory there from the developers. Kill all crackers. Well, that's a lovely message. Okay. Hello to A and D, probably Ash and Dave, and I and M, and S and H, and Dave, and S and T, and etc. etc. Okay. Anyway, so obviously the music is by Maniacs of Noise, as this message says. But basically, I want to make sure that the load accumulator at C001 is reading the correct memory range. So we can see what the blank memory pattern looks like, or empty memory pattern looks like, right? It's a repeating pattern of zeros and Fs. Let's try and narrow this memory range down to what should be sample data. And then we need to change the code at C01D to then alter the high address of the memory range that we're actually trying to read. So let's find a suitable memory range. Let's say, for example, we start playing back maybe what we think is or assume is sample data from something like 3300, for example. We know that sample data is roughly ending at 8000 in hex, or 7FFF, which is the byte before. So let's assemble some better code for making this memory range shorter, and that code should go at C020, not C025, of course. So the high address is at C003 because that's the load accumulator absolute instruction. That's what that's doing. So we want to, well, if we've got a plus number, a positive number from 0 to 7F, that's positive. But 80 has the sign bit set, so that's negative. So that if we're positive, we just go back to C001, which is the load accumulator, and then load accumulator absolute, and then we'll just change the load high address to be, so for example, 30, maybe. That's before the start of the message in memory. I think that should probably be 30 should be okay, right? We'll change that to be storing that in 3, yes, and then we'll jump back to C001. Now, if we let this routine run, there we go. There we go, we don't have so much screechy noise now from the random data in memory or the code or whatever it is. We're just playing what we think is sample data. So this is a very quick and easy demonstration, relatively speaking, of how you play samples on the Commodore 64. There are a few different ways. You can use the volume register, you can try and use the sound chip waveforms and play samples that way, which is a lot more complex and needs more accurate timing. Whereas just tweaking the volume register is much less, or much easier. It requires much less timing sensitive code. You still need to time it relatively accurately so that your samples play back at a reasonable rate, but it's a lot easier. So I'm just updating my note file, which of course I'm going to commit to source control, so you can see the same notes that I'm writing. It's also a good little way of reminding me what I've done in terms of, my memory and stuff. So let's go into the next part of the game. Since we've had a look at that intro screen and the sample playback, I think that intro screen is quite nice. When I first got this game, I was really amazed and blown away by the quality of the music. I think I had this game on disc. I had fewer games on disc than I had on tape, but I think I had this original version on disc. But yeah, I was blown away by the music, as I think many people were. And then this one comes along, and then you get blown away even more because the music on this is fantastic. The quality of the intro is really good too. And the bouncing text was also quite a big surprise, along with the samples. You're kind of like thinking, well, how does the Commodore 64 do this? How can we have bouncing text plus nice sampled music going on? And it's like, what? Seriously, how much memory are you throwing at this? So if we look at the debug text screen view here and the bitmap view and the sprites view, we can see that there's quite a lot of graphical data being updated. The bouncing text, as you might expect, is updating quite a bit of graphics data dynamically. Let's see if we can find the text screen. So I think if we scroll through the character sets with this text screen, we should find... And there we go. So the title screen is using a couple of different character sets at least. We have a character set dedicated to just the bouncing letters. Not a surprise, it's quite a common technique that you would find in demos. The character set data is arranged in such a way that it's relatively quick and simple to update the vertical positions for each of the characters, and you just update the whole thing. And the characters on the text screen are arranged in such a way that it makes use of the character set data. It's quite a lot of... There we go. You can see there the text screen has been organized in such a way that basically the full range of characters is used from the character set data there. So if we have a look through, we can see that the character set view so it's using the character set at F000. There's also a character set for the bottom part of the screen there, which is at E800, so that's the second character set being used for this title screen. We can see that the Probe logo and the Sega logo are also using the sprite overlays that we can see, so that's how they look a little bit more colourful than you would normally expect. So the sprites overlay on top, and then there's a third character set for the Turbo Outrun logo. So there's at least 3 character sets and sprites overlaid on this to actually get this title screen working really quite well. It's a lovely effect. Let's just dig around in the memory a little bit more. We can see that the logos scroll off quite smoothly and everything, a nice little effect. We have this transition screen here. The great thing about this game is that it uses highly polished, I think, anyway, presentation. The disk loader actually is pretty good in this version as well. It's quite speedy. We can see that we're getting a relatively good disk transfer rate. The sticking on the blue screen was a little bit of a surprise. I might have thought that the game crashed, but there we go. This is the level. Game view. So let's hunt around using the graphics debug windows to see if we can find out a little bit more about the game view. So I've popped up the monitor window. We can see here that the video memory and the character set are at the highest VIC bank, up at C000 onwards. So let's scroll all the way through there. Oh, well, there we go. Immediately from the text screen debug view, we can see that there's a character set at C800 for the top and bottom of the game display there, the time display, the stage display, and the speed and the gear stick views. Okay, the bottom part of the speed and rev dials, or whatever they are sprites. We can see that in the debug graphics map there. We can see actually that, oh, that's intriguing. This looks like a partial debug view of maybe color screen backup, but it is not being completely cleared. You don't need to clear the full color screen if you are rendering fully transparent characters, of course. So that's an optimization this game has done, is that it might not be doing full character screen clears. Okay, that's cool. But it needs somewhere, if it's doing a render over a couple of frames, it needs like a backup place to be able to do the color data compositing. Potentially. Let's go through memory and see what else we can find. Oh, look. So even though the game top and bottom parts of the screen are in the high VIC bank, we seem to have graphics screens in the second VIC bank, starting at 4000 there. So let's see if we can find the character sets for these screens. So we found one character set at 4800. Okay. Oh, it looks like we've got two character sets. So this game uses a ton of character sets. And look. Oh, look. Okay, so the city background there is... Oh, okay, the city background uses the character set at 5000, and then the road part of the game display uses the character set at 4800. That's fantastic. Okay, that means that the game main part of the display is using at least two different character sets. And that's interesting, isn't it? If you note, the two character sets at 4800 and 500 have duplicated characters or overlapping characters for the buildings and the trees, the roadside objects. But the city and the road part of the game display has different characters. So that's a really good way of doing it. So that means that you have more graphical variation than you would normally just be able to get using one character set. And because the horizon is a good horizontal split point, that's why the game is using two different character sets for that. Also, if you note, the clouds are not appearing in the character screen view. So I think the clouds are sprites. And the clouds sprites are prioritized behind the game screen. Interesting. Okay. So we can see what in the game are sprites and what are not. So we can see that the clouds are sprites and the cars are sprites as well. So the cars coming into view are definitely sprites because they're not appearing in the character screen debug views, right? The game overview text is obviously sprites as well. And we can see that we're getting some dynamic character updates as well when we introduce new roadside objects by the looks of that as well. So there's a lot going on in this game, actually. I'm a little bit worried that I'm going to run out of credits because I'm not concentrating on driving. The lines down the middle of the road and the edges of the road are obviously raster effects because, again, those aren't appearing in the debug text screen view, and they move smoothly, but they flicker up and down by a pixel, so it looks like they're timed raster effects. Again, it's a good way of doing it. So if you notice, when there is a transition, when there's a transition, we seem to get updated character set data. Yep, there we go. And then these things come on. Got some trees. So notice again, the character set data will get updated when we introduce new roadside objects. The road character set also seems to be updating whether or not we've got corners coming in. Let's have a look at what the sprites. Wow, there's so much sprite graphical data as well in the second Vic Bank at 4000 being updated. Look, wow, gosh, there's so much graphical data there. The spinning car, all of this data here down in the latter half of the character set bank there is sprite data. Let's get the character set view back again. Wow, look. Oh, okay, if you notice that the car data as well is dynamically updating when different shapes of cars come on the screen. Oh, that's funny. Okay, so when the Mini, or whatever it is, gets changed to be a different car, the car graphics data, there we go, the car graphics data got updated again, as well as the character set data. So this game uses dynamic characters for the game display. It also uses dynamic sprites for the cars and other incidental graphics. It's updating the character set data for the road in sparse form, so only a few characters get updated. But yeah, a lot is going on there. Obviously, the hills in the background, which were the city blocks, or the city skyline blocks, those get dynamically updated as well. So it looks like when we go around corners, the character set data for the road there gets updated. There's a ton of dynamic updates going on here. So the car got updated to the Porsche, and now it's back to being what looks like a Mini Cooper or whatever it is. And then there's a police car, again, the police car gets updated as dynamic sprites. Wow. Tons of dynamic updates going on in this game. Since we know we're getting dynamic sprite updates, let's do a watch point for storing data into the end of the sprite bank. And when we play the game, and then when, hopefully, the car gets changed, so this is still a Mini, or whatever it is, let's see if we can get a police car to come on screen. Okay, it's still a Mini. There we go. So the breakpoint has triggered, and oh look, it's doing a load from 7800 and pushing it onto the stack, and then doing a load from somewhere else high up in memory, and then storing it into 7800. So let's have a look at the sprite data from the end of memory. And yeah, oh look, it looks like it's copying over bits of cars and then storing that into the game display, into the main Vic Bank, and then it's updated it with a different kind of graphic for the car. There we go, police car, for example. So yeah, it's doing graphical swaps with graphics data higher up in memory during the game level when it's running. So this is, kind of like a standard technique, but it's nice to see a game use so many varied techniques for increasing the graphical variation of the game as you're actually playing it. If you have a look back through my videos, and I'll link it in the description below, the turbocharge, when we were looking at turbocharge, for example, it was also using a lot of dynamic updates for its characters and the sprites. I ran out of time, and this is the game over course map that we've played through. So it looks like a bitmap view, right? Yep, there's the bitmap, and then there's the bitmap for the high score entry. So So kind of like standard bitmap stuff, really. Now we're back in the title screen with the bouncing text. Let's just do a watch store point with D418, which is the SID volume register. Again, we've got the same kind of like sample playback, apart from this time it's doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shifts. And that's interesting. So it looks like it's using fewer bits for the title screen sample data. Maybe it's just rebalancing the volume of the samples compared to the music, perhaps. But anyway, it's stored in a similar format, probably high and low nibble. In the game, let's see if we can stop the timer from counting down, right? Because I want to debug a little bit further in the game part. So let's do a new memory scan using ICU64 debugging tools to find what's equal to 60, 59, 50. Let's see if we can time it. There we go. Okay. And let's see if we can look for 40. Okay, so it's not binary coded decimal for this value. Probably not. So let's look for just the time units. So let's do equal to 8. Wait for the countdown to go 8. There we go. Okay, and then let's do equal to a different value. There we go, 8 again. Right, and then I'm using the pause here to then change it to 7. There we go. So we'll do equal to 7. Oh, and look, it's narrowed it down almost immediately to 3F36, which looks like the counter value, at least for the units, right? So that's now 4. It's reflecting the 4 that's in the time up in the top left-hand corner of the screen. So it looks like 3F96 is the units for the timer. Whoops, let's get the window back again. 3F36, right? Yeah, 3F36. So 3F36 is the units for the timer. Let's see what, let's change that to be 99 first of all. Let's see what happens if we do that. Okay, so the timer value is a bit wrong. Okay, and we've still got the game over. So let's go back. Let's try that again. So the timer is at 60. Yeah, it's definitely the units, isn't it? It's not the full value. Okay, so let's do a watch on the store point for 3F36. And there we go. There's the code. Almost, after a second or so, less than a second, it came up with this. Oh, look, so we've got a decrement at 3F36 and another decrement at 3F35. Okay. So it looks like we've got units column, tens column at 3F35 there. The fractions of a second are probably at 3E97, I guess. Maybe, possibly. But I think if we remove the decrements for the timer units and the timer tens column values, then I think that might probably stop the timer from counting down. Let's put 99 in there. Yeah, we've got timer 99 value into those two memory locations. So we could keep on putting 99 into those two memory locations and then having a very long timer, but I think we should just get rid of the timer completely. Getting the timer completely would basically mean doing an RTS at 3EA2. So let's put 60 at 3EA2, which is basically putting an RTS on that decrement there. And then let's go back to the game and then let's see what happens. We need to get rid of the breakpoints. There we go. And now the timer has frozen at 98 seconds. So I think that's killed the timer code. Now that we've killed the timer code, we can inspect what's going on with this road graphics, with the road graphics on the thing here. So if I move my car left and right, I can see that the perspective on the road really doesn't change. The road, the characters used for the road are still G and H and I and J for the middle two lines, for example. And if I yeah, if I was moving the car left and right, then we can see that those lines really don't change the characters that they're using. So the perspective on the road wasn't changing. Let's move across. Yes, it's just shifting the whole screen left and right. Of course, a hill has just come along, so the hill is using slightly different characters. But yeah, the I and the J here for the text screen debug view. Obviously at is the first character and it's transparent. It looks like it's empty. It looks like at. Character code 0 is being used. If I edit the screens using the edit mode in ICU64, it's not using that screen bank. It's using, there we go, I can draw characters now from one of the buildings over to the rest of the rest of the cloud, or rest of the sky, which should be cleared with at, but it's not. So yeah, we can see that there are sprites behind views with the clouds now. We can see that pretty clearly. Looks like I've corrupted part of the sprite data by putting the building characters graphics data into the top part of the screen there. Let's clear that back out again. Yeah, okay, car graphics data is now being cleared out properly. Okay, that's fine. But anyway, yeah, the characters used for the road is not perspective correct. So if I move it left and right, the perspective for the viewpoint of the road doesn't change. That really significantly simplifies the road drawing routine. It reduces vastly the amount of characters that you need to have stored for the road, which is a perfectly fine way of doing it. Now, games like Turbocharge, for example, they did have a road which changed perspective. The sides, the angles at the side of the road did change when the road was swinging left and right from a perspective point of view. So these different road routines demonstrate different ways of delivering approximately similar visual effects. But when you're playing this game, you know, I didn't really notice it to begin with, that the perspective on the road wasn't changing. I just thought that, you know, it was just, you know, swooshing left and right. So obviously it's not that much of a big deal, really, right? And it does, as I say, massively improve or reduce, rather, the complexity of the road drawing routine. Let's see if we can find out where the roadside object graphics data is coming. So let's put a watch store point on the third row down of the screen. Let's move around a little bit. Okay, so this watch store point on the screen, this looks like an optimized, semi-optimized anyway, screen clear routine. It's clearing it with 0, which is the at character. So it's clearing the screen bank data with at there. So let's hop over that. We're not interested in a clear, we're interested in a roadside object store. So it's clearing the screen bank again. And then there we go. It's okay, so it's loading from indirect E4, Y, there at 1B30, and then it's storing at E0 indirected, Y. So if we have a look at what's in E0, E1, E4, and E5, so that's the memory address for the screen bank, and that's the memory address for the source data, which is low byte, high byte, so it's 8C57. So let's have a look at the graphics data at 8C57. Let's have a look at the text screens. Let's get a suitable character set being viewed. So we'll look at the road-based character set for the screen view there, 8C57. So let's have a look at the graphics text screen data at roughly 8C57, roughly, which is going to be the fourth screen in the bottom right hand corner. And there we go. Look, pretty obvious that this is compressed building roadside graphics data here. Using the correct character set, we can see that the characters mostly are comprised of building characters. So yeah, that looks like compressed graphics data. Probably compressed in row byte order, I would expect. So that's where that's where some of the roadside objects graphics data is being stored in memory, at least in this portion of the game. So keep an eye out where that building data was, and there we go. Look, it's changed when these horizontal gantries come on, and then it's changed again to be billboards, or you know, the top of the woman's head for the billboard. So yeah, this is definitely dynamic roadside object data being moved into the same part of memory, so that we have these different roadside objects coming along. Quite cool, right? So there is a ton of dynamic allocation going on. If we have a look at the memory view as we progress through the game view, let's just restore the sprite data so that we don't have bad looking graphics of the cars. It looks like some of the sprite data of the cars comes from there. Okay, so there we go. Just drawing those characters so that we can see when the game draws over those painted characters in memory there. There we go. So every time it transitions to these different roadside objects, we can see from the memory view that we get some memory writes going on inside the roadside object data there. So there is a ton. Look at the memory view there. Lots of reads, lots of writes going on. The yellow color writes going into the memory there. Okay, and then we've got the next part of the game, which is side 2 of the disk. Where was the disk file? I need to find where the disk files are. So we get this lovely intermission screen where we can choose between engine, tires, and turbo. Doesn't really matter because I've got infinite time, right? Because I've disabled the time. But I love this intermission screen with all of these sprites. Wow, look how many sprites there are. Gosh, so much graphics data. Wow, look, tons of sprites all over the place in memory. Gosh. Probably the animation changes, right? Depending on whether or not you pick engine, tires, or turbo. Really nice presentation in this game. Really very well polished. The text screen obviously displays the engine, tires, or turbo there. The timer is counting down, so we need to do the same thing for this. Probably loaded the code or loaded data over that place in memory. Okay, so yeah, I think we need to find out where the timer is again, where the timer code is. Doing the same kind of thing as before by using watch the store points and hunting for the changed bytes in memory. We can see that the code has moved. Now it's at 3E85. That's where we need to put the RTS. So yeah, the game is loading different code for the second part. The code is at a slightly different offset, so that's why we know that the code has changed. In the debug graphics text screen view there, I can see what looks like fragments of differently sized palm trees. If I change the graphics data for these differently sized palm trees, we should be able to see that reflected in the game view once I actually move forward. Of course, I've just changed it so that the palm trees are using transparent characters, which is no good, right? Because then we wouldn't see a palm tree. Let's change it so that it's using non-transparent characters this time. So let's move ahead a little bit more. There we go. We can see that the palm trees now, on the left-hand side, when they get large, they're using a lot of different non-transparent characters that we're painting over with in this debug text screens view there. So we know that different parts of this memory are drawing different roadside objects at different times. It looks like the game has been set up in such a way as that some roadside objects can be updated independently from others, which is a good thing to have, so that it means that you can retain the palm trees for several different transitions, but also have different other roadside objects like different buildings or different chevron corner displays and stuff like that, which is really quite cool. That's really nice to see. Or roadside objects. So those roadside objects for the barriers were actually in the text screen mode, text screen debug view there, rather than sprites. And that's not a surprise because the sprite memory is actually quite full up with the frames for the car, for the player car, but also the frames for the police car or the Mini or whatever it is that comes on the roadside object view. So I zoomed through the rest of the levels by using the infinite timesheet, and oh look, this congratulations screen, it looks like the sprite priorities for it's the Porsche version, right, of the car, is appearing behind the Ferrari version of the car that's being used. So the sprite priorities are wrong. Let's see if we can fix those sprite priorities. Let's load the last snapshot file that I saved just now, which was part 5. We can see the last game views displayed there on the double buffered character screens in the text screen debug view. Let's wait until the sprites have been initialized, hopefully, and then let's have a look at the I/O. D000 for the VIC chip state, the video chip state. Yeah, look, most of the sprites are in background mode rather than foreground sprite mode. Let's change that so that all of the sprites are in the foreground now, rather than most of them in the background. And there we are. The car now appears in front of the Ferrari congratulations background screen. So there we go. That's the sprite priority fixed for the congratulations screen. Maybe that's a bug in the release version of the game. We have the course map now showing the game being completed, so the little sprite car, that we can see that the sprites for the car. Down there in the bottom middle of the screen we can see that it's updating the bitmap view for the course map. The bitmap view for the course map is filling in the road as the car moves along. Nice little thing to do. So it's just basically updating the bitmap data that's displayed on the screen. And there we go. And then we have the bitmap data, of course, bitmap screen data for the Turbo Outrun logo that we already know about for the high score entry. I think we'll leave this video there. I've gone through most of the things I wanted to talk about with Turbo Outrun. If you enjoy watching these kinds of Commodore 64 retro games memories and deep technical dives into what the games use in terms of techniques and graphics, updates and everything else, then please do consider liking or subscribing to my channel, and I hope to catch you around next time. Have a great day, evening or night, wherever you are.